But everyone has a different story to tell. Shell, which says it's losing it.
The Tampa market. Staggering rise.
In Northeast Africa, precisely on the Horn of Africa.
The local plant. But everyone has a different story to tell. Shell, which says it's losing it.
The Tampa market. Staggering rise.
In Northeast Africa, precisely on the Horn of Africa.
The local plant.
All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to WCC this morning. I'm your host. Once again, this is Frank. As usual, every Friday we are here, and thank you for coming on. As you come, please share the live. Please share so that it can be reached out to other folks. And also those that will watch the recording, they will also have the opportunity to get the message and to be educated as well. And they can also share the information. So today's topic is called the worst demanding in a very fashionable way, okay? Demanding African leaders in a very fashionable way to become an enemy to their enemies. The worst, they are demanding African leader in a very fashionable way to become an enemy to their enemies. That is what we are going to discuss today. So before we get into it, once of all, I want to welcome you all here and good morning to all of you. Thank you again for tapping in, and thank you for going on our website and reading our articles. And thank you for your donation. And those of you who have made it possible to become part of our Patreon, we say thank you. All right. So the time has come for Africa and for African people. The time has come. The time has come. The time has come to harvest. The time has come to prove to the world that yes, indeed, we are African, we are resilient. The time has come. The time has come when foreign leader, when American governments or European government once said, Africans are not good at leadership. The time has come to prove to them that Africans are good at leadership. The time has come to prove to them that Africans are the best when it comes to leadership. The time has come to prove to them that African, no matter how or what the circumstances is, African can never and ever be left out. The time has come. The time has come to prove to the world that African are the creation of the world, and that African can never be left out in the creation of the existence of mankind. The time has come. Not to waste time, let's get into it. So before I can get you to understand the concept of what we are about to talk about today, I want to put you in a very perspective frame of mind to be able to grab the concept of what we are here to discuss today. Because the time has come. So I'm going to begin with a video, okay? So before I begin with that video, let me say this. There have been no point in time Western leaders have ever traveled to the African continent, diplomatic or delegates, representative, and so forth. In this time period of geopolitics, American leaders, to be specific, European leaders, to be specific, have traveled on the African continent than any time in history. They have traveled on the African continent than any time in history. Again, the time has come. African people are not going to pay back with brutality. African people are not going to pay back with blood. African people are not going to pay back by enslaving other people. African people are not going to pay back by colonizing other nation or other nationality or other country or other continent. But the time has come for African people to prove to the world that in the existence of mankind, African were first, and African will always remain first and not neglected. So let's see this before we can actually get into this video or this discussion today. So let me get your attention. Let me get your undivided attention before we get into it with this video.
As always, Africa's fortunes depend on a lot of factors, a lot of outside factors. Until World War II, the entire continent was carved up by world powers. It was a hotbed of exploitation and discrimination. 7 decades later, the world powers are back: Russia, the US, and China. First to visit was Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia. He traveled to Egypt, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Congo. Lavrov's visit had two objectives: A, to show that his country still has allies. Many African countries have refused to condemn Russia's war in Ukraine. Lavrov's visit was supposed to reaffirm those ties. And B, to control Africa's resources. I'm talking about both human and natural resources. Africa is home to 30% of global mineral reserves. It is also an emerging market for foreign products. Russia wants a chunk of both. Now, Lavrov's visit was back in July. 2 weeks later, the US has dispatched their foreign minister, Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He landed in South Africa earlier this week. He kicked off his visit with this promise.
The United States will not dictate Africa's choices. Neither should anyone else. The right to make these choices belongs to Africans, and Africans alone.
Sounds like a good line, doesn't it? One of those statements that history books tend to like. But beyond that, does it signify anything? The whole point of Blinken's visit is to build up US influence. He may not be saying it, but Blinken's message is quite clear. Do not pick Russia or China. Is that not dictating choices? Why else did Blinken rush to Africa immediately after Lavrov? So let's keep the romanticism aside for a moment. Let's focus on the power play. Blinken's schedule is politically significant. His first stop is South Africa. Their government has traditionally been neutral to global conflicts. In Ukraine, too, they have not picked a side. At the same time, South Africa is key to the continent's future. A, it is politically stable, and B, it is the second largest African economy. So good ties with South Africa are high on America's agenda. Blinken's second stop is the Congo, one of the most richly endowed African countries. It has deposits of diamond, gold, copper, cobalt, tin, and lithium, all crucial minerals. The US is hoping to gain access to these deposits, or if they can't access them, at least keep Russia and China out. The final stop is Rwanda, an important ally of the United States. It is also involved in a conflict in eastern Congo. So Blinken will be hoping to hit two birds with one stone. Use his leverage over Rwanda to ease the tensions in the Congo. Will it work? We'll find out soon enough. On paper, the US is well placed to build ties in Africa. They have deep pockets, they have the military infrastructure, they have no colonial past in Africa. So why exactly have they not performed well? Because of poor leadership, you could say. Barack Obama's presidency was supposed to transform America's Africa policy. After all, he was the first African-American president of the US. His father was a Kenyan government official. But like most of Obama's policies, it was a failure. All talk, no action. Donald Trump was a step further. He insulted African countries. In fact, Trump never visited a single African country as US president. Imagine that. 4 years, 0 visits to Africa. And during this time, Russia and China were busy. Russia built military ties with Africa. China built economic ties. Let's start with Russia. Their mercenaries are fighting in multiple African wars in Mali, in the Central African Republic, and in Libya. They also buy a lot of Russian weapons. Almost 49% of Africa's military imports come from Russia. This includes tanks, fighter jets, helicopters, guns, all sorts of weapons. This defense trade has given Russia diplomatic clout in Africa. I'll give you an example. In the month of March, the United Nations passed a resolution condemning Russia's war. 35 countries abstained from voting. 35. Out of these, 15 countries were from Africa. In other words, they're not willing to hurt Russia's sentiments. Now, coming to China, in 2009, they overtook the US to become Africa's largest trading partner. Total trade, almost $254 billion. They're also the largest investor. In the last 5 years, China has pumped $70 billion into Africa. This money is spread across 287 projects. Most of them are white elephants. They're designed to push Africa into a debt trap. But then again, what option do these countries have? It's either poverty or debt trap. Not really a good choice to make. So compared to Russia and China, America is playing catch up. The question is, how fast can they close the gap? A lot depends on Joe Biden's strategy. If he's serious about Africa, he needs a broader plan. He needs to get all Western partners on the same page. France, for example. Yes, they are a former colonial power, but France has considerable clout in the continent. Secondly, he needs to loosen his purse strings. I'm not talking about buying Africa's support. I'm talking about genuine investments in Africa, safer alternatives compared to China and Russia. And all of this will take time. It won't happen with one visit by Antony Blinken. It will take a long-term plan with serious political capital.
All right, so that's the video that I want to get your attention with, because this is what exactly we are going to get into as we begin to read. You will understand what this whole thing is about. Now, let me make this clear. What we are about to discuss here today is not in any way to say we are not in support of the United States and then we are in support of China or we are in support of Russia. We don't care. What we care for or about here today and forward, we care about Africa. Okay? We care about Africa. We don't care what the West will say. We care about Africa and African people. Henceforth, we support anyone, any nation, any continent that recognize the struggle, the problem, the situation of African people, both home and abroad. We work with them and we sympathize with them. We work with anybody that recognize the situation and the problem of African people around the continent, around the globe, in the world. We sympathize with them and we work with them. That means no one will dictate to Africa. It might have happened in the past, but not now. No one will dictate to African as to who they should become friends with, as to who they should not become friends with, as to whom their enemies should be. It might have happened in the past, not now, not anymore. So we have the right and the choice to exist and to make business with anyone. We have the right to determine who we should be friends with. And we have the right to determine our choices. Whether we like you or not, you can't tell us who to like and who not to like. Now, Anthony Blinken said he will not dictate to African choices. Since when? That is political lie. Geopolitics is what he's playing on the African continent. And we have facts to prove, to give to them. He will not dictate to the African choices. Since when? Anthony Blinken is in the same country that undermine African choices, that undermine African democracy. It's not the same thing there. Are you not dictating to our choices? It's in the same country that go with the FBI and CIA to kill African leaders only because they do not agree with their foreign policy. Is that not undermining African choices? Is it not the same country that puts sanctions on African nations if African leaders disagree with their demand or with their foreign policy, which of course will not be in the interest of that country, and you go in directly or indirectly and assassinate that president or put sanction on that country? Is that not dictating to African choices? You see, your sin is catching on to you guys, and you guys are so confused. And it's very simple. It's very simple. Recognize your sin and take responsibility of your sin. But don't pretend, because the more you pretend, the more we get to understand. And the more you speak, the more we get to understand that you are a pretender, you are a hypocrite. Because you have an unknown story. You have an unknown story. Or let's say you have a known story that we know. You have a story that we know. You have true story that we know. And you're trying to hide it. It will not happen to this generation. This generation of African, whether on the continent or whether in the diaspora, we are united because we have recognized, we have come to realize that despite our differences, we have one enemy. One enemy. And that enemy have one intention for all African people. Henceforth, we have decided to come together. Henceforth, we have decided to recognize what is at stake for African people. Now, the presenter said the United States have had or never had a colonial path in Africa. No, she had. She had a colonial past in Africa. She had what they call settlers colony, which was different from the people that was in the meeting of the 1884 Berlin Conference. And that is not to say the United States never had a representative that was represented there. And that is not to say the United States was not in Africa at that time. The United States was in Africa in 1822. Even beyond 1822, the United States was in Africa around 1821, in Liberia before 1884. So imagine that. So she used what they call settlers colony to establish a colony. Let's get that history true and let's get the facts. And we are not just speaking off our head. These are things that we have researched and we have learned and we have evidence to it. She used what they call settlers colony, which is kind of different from strictly people who went strictly to Africa. That is why after the 1884 Berlin Conference, when they went to Africa, they did not go to Liberia. They stopped in Sierra Leone, stopped in Ivory Coast, stopped in Guinea. Even before us that, Guinea was already on France. Guinea was already on France before 1884 Berlin Conference. Let's get that straight. Africa was already under France control before the 1884 Berlin Conference. Let's get that straight. Sierra Leone was already on Great Britain before the 1884 Berlin Conference. Let's get that straight. That is what they surrounded Liberia, and they now went to Liberia because the United States was already there. And even before the 1884 Berlin Conference, the United States have already created a barrier with its navies, with its flag around the sea coast, letting other colonizers, this is our territory, do not come here. But that will be another discussion for another time. We know these stories now, and we are digging the story, okay? So I understand you did a great job, but the United States, you what they call settlers colony. Now, let's get into it. Now that I have gotten your attention about that video, this is what we're going to get into right now. This is what we're going to get into right now. So first of all, we're going to the Chinese embassy. And to be fair, I'm going to play the fair game here, okay? So I brought up two articles. And one is from the Chinese embassy. And the other one, the Chinese embassy in Liberia, okay? And the other one is from the United States embassy in Liberia. Fair game, okay? No bias, fair game. Again, we are not for anybody, but we are for African and for African people. We fight for the interests of Africa and for the African people. We do not care about any colonizer or about any other nation also, because they all have their own interests. Okay? So what we are discussing here is we are looking at the facts and what African people need to do or have to do. That is why we are talking. That is why we are here today. Okay. So we are going to say some things that will be based on liberation. This channel is a revolutionary channel. So we speak like revolutionary. Okay. Let's get into it. For the first article here, we're going to bring out the article from the Chinese embassy in Liberia. Now, why Liberia is into this? Liberia is a very strategic area in Africa, that tiny little nation. Geographically, Liberia is a strategic area on the African continent. Very resourceful, very useful when it comes to military-wise, when it comes to the airspace, when it comes to the ocean body, when it comes to mineral resources, everything involved. Liberia is a very strategic area. Now, the United States or Africa as a settler colonist to the United States, she feels that she's losing Africa. Her grip on, let's say Liberia, her grip on Liberia is slowly going away. And she can't compete. She's finding it difficult to compete because she have never competed with anybody in Liberia. And that is why our country is a suffering country since 1822 up to 2022. That country is a suffering country in all sectors of life. Let's get into it. So, like I said, I'm going to be fair. So this article is the Chinese article or Chinese part of the bargaining from the Chinese embassy in Liberia. All right. So let's see here what they have to say. So what is written here was a statement from 2020. But in recent time, according to the Scramble of Africa, this story from 2020 came out again. And that is why the Chinese brought this out. And by the way, I'm going to read. I'm just going to read this, okay? Because it's long and I'm not really going to explain because the Chinese explain everything here. So we're going to see what is in here and then we read the American one from the American embassy and then see and then do the judgment, okay? Now, the U.S. plot to undermine China, Liberia, and China Africa Friendly Corporation doomed to fail. Recently, the embassy of the United States in Liberia posted a message on its Facebook account and African Star website. It warned African countries, including Liberia, not to use Chinese technology, claimed that China's aid has caused a huge debt trap for African countries and accuses China of stealing American intellectual property and trade assets. Now, first of all, let me speak a simple African English. What it be our concern? What it say be our concern? If say Chinese people, they steal American intellectual property and trade asset. What it be our concern be that? Now, what concern us? That is not our concern. If China steal American intellectual property and trade asset, if China did that, go after China. But you can't come and tell us because the Chinese stole your intellectual property and trade assets, then African nations or Liberia should go against China. Your enemies are not our enemies. That which Nelson Mandela told us. You so believe in Nelson Mandela, but you do not carry on the policy or the ideology of Nelson Mandela. If you have problem with China, if Chinese people stole your property, go after China. But don't come and tell us, oh, because they stole our property, then we should go against China. No. Go after China. You can sue China for stealing your intellectual property and trade assets. That is not our business. Nothing be our concern. Let's continue here. So that is complete propaganda. Now, the article maliciously slandered and groundlessly speculate on Chinese technology and China Africa Corporation, which is totally unfolded, full of Cold War mentality, Of course, we know how the Cold War started, right? Now, this is just another strategy coming out. Now, let me go into this a little bit. That is not my business, but I will just dip into it because we want for African people and African leaders to understand, even though we know the African leaders are taking a stand, but yet and stay, we need to bring out information to let them know because they do not know, or even though they are in position of power, they do not know, or they are also human beings. And we can also help to give them knowledge, to enlighten them. Now, this is one situation. There is war with Ukraine and Russia. Knowing very well that China and Russia influence on the African continent and make it impossible. I don't even want to say compete, and make it impossible for the West to exploit the African resources and the African continent. Henceforth, if Russia is fighting war, Russia will focus on the war than focusing on competing in Africa. Henceforth, that same technique have been created between China and Taiwan. Understand the geopolitics in here, folks. You listen to the first video. They have to do a lot of stuff before they can get hold of Africa, and that is what they are doing. So financially, they cannot compete with Russia and China. Militarily, they cannot in Africa. Okay? They cannot compete with Russia and China in Africa militarily and financially. They cannot. Technology, they cannot. So that is what the first video said. Before they can get hold of Africa, they have to do a lot. And these are some of the things. Now, the Russians are focused on fighting war, right? They were not focused on competing with other people in Africa as when there was no war. In the same way, the geopolitics is playing out between China and Taiwan. I have made video on this before, and I want Taiwan. I said to Taiwan, make peace with China. Don't get it twisted, or else you will end up being a Ukraine. And it is not yet late. Taiwan, it is not in your interest. Geopolitics is going on here. The issue here is to put China and Taiwan together to fight. Then while they are fighting, China will not have the time to compete in Africa as when there is no war. But if those two countries are fighting now, are focused on war, then the colonialist, the colonizer will not have the time to hold Africa. Because you know why? African leaders will not have the time to go to China again for summit. Or the Chinese will not be coming to Africa again. Or going to Russia. Now, where the African leaders will be going out for money is the West, America and Europe. Because only money African leaders chase. It is very easy to develop the African continent. We are not fighting, or we are not in competition with anyone. We have the population. Use the population to develop Africa. We can build. If we build America, if we build Europe, we can build Africa. That is the geopolitics going on here. Let China focus on war, just how Russia is fighting war, and she will not have the time to compete. Because war is expensive. The money they need to use, the technology they need to use in Africa to compete with us, they will have to use it in their war or on their war. And then at that time, we can gradually move on the African continent to reclaim geopolitics. All right, let's see here. Now, full of Cold War mentality, political prejudice, and typical bullying. This is what they do. They bully the African nation, okay? Now, it has exposed the evil intention and political motivation of the USSR in an attempt to mislead the people of Liberia and Africa by spreading rumors and to undermine and obstruct the deepening China-Africa cooperation. Now, when China actually went into Africa, this is a very good question for America and Europe. When did China actually fought in Africa to start making business with African people? If not in the 2000s. But you've been on the African continent since 1884 up to the 2000s. What did you do? You are not running competition. No one was running competition with you. You have everything to yourself. What did you do? Well, you honor my African leaders. You honor develop the African continent. This is what you did. This is what you did. Right here. This is what you did. Like water running pot here. How Europe honor develop Africa. How Europe honor develop the African continent. This is what you did. When you had the opportunity, this is what you did. You honor develop Africa. Now, the Chinese study your ways and they try to upgrade in a different fashionable way that will benefit Africa. It depends on what African leaders what would be their own agenda or petition or discussion with the Chinese authority. It depends what they have in exchange to give to China and for China to give to us. But for you, European, America and Europe, Washington, D.C., what you have given to African continent over time is sanction, coup d'etat, proxy war, and so forth, undermining, and so forth. Discussing the African people as non-human beings. Let's continue. In the article, the U.S. side claimed that Chinese technologies is attached to the government, and there are risks of data collection and cyber security. The Chinese just learn from you guys. Anything you guys do in Africa is all monitoring. You monitor everything. So why would the Chinese people do it and you get angry? This is not to say we are on the side of the Chinese. What we are saying here is, do not tell us to decide where to go, who to go to. Now, taking China aid to African Union headquarters, building so-called evidence. The U.S. side accused China of secretly installing electronic equipment to collect data, thus misleading Liberia to be alert of the security risks. In such project as a ministerial complex in the terminal building of the Rabat International Airport, constructed by Chinese company. Now, America, if you are afraid of this, why didn't you do it? If you were afraid of this, why didn't you do it? Now, after the war, why didn't you do it? Why didn't you build the Rabat International Airport? Why didn't you build a ministerial complex? And all those buildings, governmental buildings or state buildings, why didn't you do it? It's just simple. Let's continue. Last year, the US and more Western media repeatedly quote the story of China interception of the AU headquarters, which was purely fabricated fake news. China has never carried out any so-called data collection activities through its aid project, including in Africa. And many African leaders and the chairperson of the AU Commission have publicly refuted them. This rumor has already been rubbished by African friends. It is obvious that the old news is now picked up again by the U.S. Embassy in Liberia with mean hat, and it is typical tricks of a thief crying, "Stop thief." Now, this is what the Chinese said. It is now picked up again by the U.S. Embassy in Liberia with mean hat, and it is typical trick of a thief crying, "Stop thief." Now, and the Chinese people said it. I'm just reading it. As is known to all, the United States is the settler of a bad example, threatening cyber security of the world. In recent years, the document leaked by WikiLeaks, the Prismagate scandal disclosed by Eero Snow, Equation Group, the Echelon system, and other incidents show that for a long time, the U.S. has been regularly and secretly intercepting in various countries around the world, including its own ally, and has collected usual information, one played through the platform of American internet giant, U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo himself. I was the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. We lied. This is a United States diplomat talking now. We lie, we cheated, we stole, and we've had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment, regime change backing. Who do those things? Again, regime change backing. It's just dropping to be so brazen. The United States itself is full of sting, but it is still talking about clean network, claiming to protect the privacy of American citizens and sensitive trade secret of American enterprise. In fact, China has always been the target and victim of American cyber attack. It is reported that each year, the United States control over 3 million computers in China and implant Trojan into more than 3,600 websites in China. The United States has also repeatedly accused China of stealing intellectual property, but it has failed to produce apparent evidence. The fact is, China has always respected and protected intellectual property and actively carry out dialogue and cooperation on intellectual property protection. The purpose of the U.S. slandering and defaming is obvious. Its essential is to suppress Chinese technology enterprise and hinder Chinese development process. Recently, the United States has used state power to intensify the suppression of enterprise with Chinese accessory, such as Huawei, WeChat, and TikTok, warmly suppressing Chinese enterprise with state power is demonstration of putting political plot above market principle and intellectual rules, which will also damage the right and interest of American users and companies. Furthermore, these steps will only result in moral decline, national image damage, and international trust deficit of the U.S., which will eventually make itself suffer the consequences. That is China saying. Now, I'm not going to read all is there because we'll be running out of time, but I'm going to read the conclusion down here. I'm going to read the conclusion, but it's in depth on what it said here. So I'll post that, you can read it. China and Africa are DAOs. China and Africa are thousands of miles apart, but we have enjoyed a long time and profound friendship as good friends, good friends, and good partner. China and Africa have fought shoulder to shoulder in the process of striving for national liberation and political independence, which is true. March side by side on the road of national construction and independent development, and are linked and are like-minded in the struggle to promote and multiply war and democratization of international relations. China has always attached importance to, respected, and supported Africa, never sought geopolitical self-interest in Africa. Who do geopolitical self-interest in Africa? It's the West. Never impose its will on others. Who impose its will on others? It's the West. The United States and Europe, and has embarked on an approach of cooperation with which is totally different from that of traditional big power. Who are the traditional big power? The United States and the West. In recent years, with the deepening of political mutual trust, the continual expansion of economic and trade cooperation, and the increasingly close people-to-people and cultural exchange between the two sides, China and Africa have become a closely related community of shared future, which share wheat and wool. No matter how the international situation changes in the future, China will uphold the principle of sincerity, real result, affirmative, and good faith, and the right approach to justice and the pursuit of interest, and unwaveringly work together with Liberia and Africa to safeguard the common interests of developing countries. Now, this is the response to China. I'm froze. Folks, I got froze. Man. All right, folks. I don't know what's going on here. All right, so you can hear me. So I will just continue. So, all right, so you can hear me, right? I will continue. Very good. Let's do it. Now, this is the response of China or the Chinese embassy in Liberia or in Africa to what the West or to what America had accused, the American embassy in Liberia had accused China of. Okay? So, what I read to you, you be the judge. What up? All right, you be the judge. Okay? So, not to waste time, let me go to the American embassy. So, I'm going to play fair game. Okay? I'm going to play fair game. All right, so I'm going to play fair game here. So this is the American embassy, okay? So U.S. embassy in Liberia warned on use of Chinese technology. Warned on use of Chinese technology. If to say the U.S. technology is a safer one that protect that protect people, right? So let's see here. Monrovia, Liberia, August 10, 2020. The U.S. embassy near the Liberian capital has taken the unusual step of posting on social media to warn of the use of Chinese-made technology. It often comes with strange attach. What have the United States or Europe given to Africa without any strange attach? Let me answer that question. Now, so here is the Rabat International Airport that was remodeled by the Chinese. Now, America, if you was going to do this, remodel this airport, Liberia was going to have no problem with you. The question here is, why didn't you do it? Why didn't you do it? That's the question. So who you want to blame? You should have done the same thing and put in your technology in here. But the Chinese did it. If the Chinese use their technology to build this, do you expect the Chinese to come and put the American technology in here? Of course, no. It's a common sense. If the Chinese build this, they build it with Chinese technology. So if you should have built this, you should have built it with your technology, the American technology. And I believe the Chinese was going to have no problem. But you did not. So what did you expect the Chinese to do? They use Chinese technology, Chinese brain, and they build it. So your argument here is weak in a sense that we should pick a side. Now, the Trump administration has aggressively pursued technology disengagement from the communist Chinese government, which it accuses of systematic theft of intellectual property and trade assets and trade secret from the United States and its allies. But China has denied the accusation and instead accused the Americans of being paranoid of its rise as a global economic power. And that's true. That's true. But China has denied the accusation and instead accused the American of being paranoid of its rise as a global economic power. And that is true. What you see around the world right now, focus China and Russia to fight war. And then in that, they cannot compete globally on the African continent. In that, they cannot compete globally on the African continent. And you're going to hear that from Blinken in the video, after this, the video I will show. What he's going to say about Africa being the next. You're going to hear that from himself. Okay? So that's the technique they play here. Focus China and Russia to fight war. And they will not compete with us on the African continent. And we will recolonize or retake the African continent. In its social media post, the U.S. Embassy detailed a media account of how a Chinese state-owned construction firm built in the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. It is also installed Hawaii service or server, later phone to be sending data to Shanghai daily. According to Shanghai daily, according to the French newspaper Le Monde, according to a recent report from the Heritage Foundation, a Washington. First of all, look at the kind of people that are reporting. These are all colonial platform or media that are reporting. Look at what is reporting here. According to the French newspaper called Another Colonist, according to a recent report from Heritage Foundation, another colonial institution or how they call it entity, a Washington think tank, another colonial institution, they reported that the private Chinese firm have built or renovated 186 government buildings in Africa and installed 14 internal government telecommunication network. The report added the Chinese government has provided office equipment, including computer, to 35 African government. Now, America, who stopped you from using your technology to build the AU headquarters? Who stopped you? It's simple. We just asking you a question. Who stopped you from using your technology to build the African Union headquarters? Who stopped you to use your technology to equip African people on the African continent? Who stopped you? Nobody stopped you. But if the Chinese are using their equipment, their knowledge, their technology to improve Africa, to give a good face look of Africa, why should that worry you? Why can't it worry African people? Do you love African people so that much? To the extent that since 1884 Berlin Conference, Africa is still struggling because of your oppression, your suppression, and your dehumanization of African people. From that 1884 Berlin Conference, Africa is still suffering from a stable government. Africa is still suffering to produce leaders that will love the African continent. Because for each time any leader come out to love the African continent, you assassinate them directly or indirectly. To the extent that even if an African leader wants to stand up and say no, she or he is afraid because she or he doesn't want to die because of you. we have evidence, bunch of evidence against you. So don't talk. What you should do is take responsibility of your action and do accordingly as we say. If not, your sin is catching on to you, because guess what? The blood of Kwame Nkrumah, the blood of Amilcar Cabral, the blood of Thomas Sankara, the blood of Patrick Lumumba, the blood of Dr. King, the blood of Malcolm X, all of them, they are crying. And because we are calling on them to cry, and your time is catching on to you, accept your responsibility and do exactly as we say. Pay reparation to African home and to African abroad and to the African continent that you colonize. Then we will have dialogue. Then we will understand that you understand what we mean. The time has come. We are not going to pay you back by enslaving you. No, 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 no. We are not going to pay you back by colonizing you. No, 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 no. But we are going to work with anyone that recognize the African struggle. We are going to work with anyone that want to see Africa a self-determined continent. You don't dictate to us. Okay? So, this is the interior of the Chinese added Liberia parliament. So this is the parliament, okay, that the Chinese designed in Liberia. The United States did not design it. What were you doing in America? You did not design this, because Liberia is a settler's colony under your jurisdiction, under your mandate. But because you are losing it now, this is the auditorium of the Chinese added ministerial complex. America, you should have used your technology and do this. But instead, the Chinese people did it. Now, let's go back to history. You know why America, you couldn't do this? Because it is a proven facts that William V.S. Tubman, he once came to you, if not today, he once came to you to have a Capitol building in Monrovia. What did you tell William V.S. Tubman? You told him Liberia does not need a mansion, what we call in the United States a White Hall. You told him Liberia does not need that building because Liberia was a settler's colony. Liberia was a colony. Henceforth, you do not need any mansion or capital building because the settlers, Liberia is not their home. That is what a settler colony is. And that's what he told William V.S. Tubman. And he said it. Now, what did William V.S. Tubman then do? Because he told him, y'all do not need any government building. Because Liberia is not a place to settle. It's not a place you're going to make as your home. Your home is America. You are still a slave. That is why Liberia is a settler's colony. That's what he told him. And what did he do? He used 9 million of his own money to build a mansion. If not today, Liberia was not going to have a mansion or a capital building. That is why in this 21st century, you refuse to use your technology. Then why should you get angry if the Chinese come to use your technology to beautify this poor little tiny country, your colony? Now, folks, so this is what happened here. I posted a video because I want to show how to call it. I posted a link because I want to show a video that is a little bit long that we go to use that are going to cover the African continent because of linking. So yes, so that's the American form or side of the story from the American website, okay, from the American embassy in Liberia. Now, so that it's just a simple question. America, why didn't you use your technology to build those things? So why should you get angry if someone else come and pass by you and use your knowledge to build it? So do you expect them, or did you expect them to put in your technology, the American technology, while they use their technology and instill your technology. No, you yourself, you wouldn't have done that. If you was going to build it, you will build it based on your technology. It's just a simple knowledge. So don't tell us what to do and what not to do. Don't tell us what to do and what not to do. We know what is good and we know what is bad. And we know what can improve and we know what cannot improve. We know what we have experienced with you and we know what we have or are experiencing with China. Now, let's get into the video. Hopefully it play, because for some reason, you know, they control the internet. First time ever for them to, you know, hold me like this, to freeze me, that I can't speak. Because they know knowledge is power. And they know knowledge is coming out. And they know we know who they are. And they know when they speak, we see the lies. So hopefully this play. I don't know if it's going to play, but hopefully it play and you listen to it. So what I'm about to show you here is Blinken in Africa running all around like a confused Secretary of the United States, very confused. He's very, very confused because time is running against them. They do not know what to do. So they are doing everything to convince African leaders one by one, and it's not going to work because the African leader themselves, they are leader. They know what better for them and for their people and for the African continent. So let's see here some of the answer, and let's see how he contradicted himself in that video. Let me mute myself, even though it's not what they call him.
And elsewhere for its isolation of Russia along with American allies. You made reference in a recent article to the failure on the part of some to appreciate the principles of sovereignty and freedom of choice that African nations must consider in this regard. Do you think that the United States and its European allies sufficiently appreciate the complex interest of African nations in this arena? And did you discuss that today with Secretary Blinken? And then Secretary Blinken, for you, one thing we noticed during Foreign Minister Lavrov's recent African visit was his promotion of Russia's model of arms sales with few strings attached, and the fact that Russia typically refrains from criticizing African nations on human rights. I know you've talked about an affirmative American vision for the continent, but how do you see that competing with the appeal that the easy access to arms or state-backed roads from China might have to some leaders in Africa? And just really quickly, how would you respond to the minister's statement she just made about inconsistency on the part of some global actors in regards to principles the U.S. is advocating for in the Ukraine conflict, which seem to be an allusion to the U.S. position in the conflict in the Middle East? Thanks.
Well, let me start this time. I'm glad that Secretary Blinken has confirmed that America is not asking us to choose. I don't recall any attempt by the United States to do that. But in terms of our interaction with some of our partners in Europe and elsewhere, there has been a sense of patronizing bullying toward you choose this or else. And the recent legislation passed in the United States of America by the House of Representatives, we found a most unfortunate bill that we'd hope the media would say more about, because when we believe in freedom, as I'm saying, it's freedom for everybody. You can't say because Africa is doing this, you will then be punished by the United States. So That's been a disappointing passage of legislation by one house, and we hope the other house will not agree to such offensive legislation. So indeed, it is important that all of us accept our ability to hold different opinions. We are, after all, sovereign nations that are regarded as equal in terms of the United Nations Charter. We may differ in terms of economic power and economic ability to influence development in different parts of the world, but what will make the world work is if we respect each other. This is very, very important. And one thing I definitely dislike is being told either you choose this or else. When a minister speaks to me like that, which Secretary Blinken has never done, but some have, I definitely will not be bullied in that way, nor would I expect any other African country worth its salt to agree to be treated. Russia, I've tried so many times to explain to so many people. Russia is a very negligible economic partner for South Africa. Our trade with Russia is less than $4 billion annually, compared to the $20 billion that I referred to earlier with respect to the United States. So this fear that we exist under some push is, I think, a totally really unfounded belief in the relationship that we have with either country. And we've been quite clear in saying we really advocate for peace because we knew what would happen. We knew there'd be destruction, there'd be death, there'd be desolation. And that's what we're all seeing. And what we've always asked is, where is this going to end? Let us make every effort to get peace. Thank you very much for the question. I think that when you approach a strategy, you need to think very carefully about the kinds of tactics that you would utilize. So the overall strategic intention might be to advocate for democracy and support its presence on the African continent. However, if your tactic is to approach African countries and say that, listen, you must be democratic, and use our model, it works. I think it's bound to lead to some failure. I do agree with Tony that all countries and peoples deserve the right to exercise their civil and political rights. But I think, given history, the approach has to be somewhat different. Commend a greater attention to tools that Africans have developed, such as the African peer review mechanism, as a way into broader discussions about governance and democracy, rather than we will. There are 44 African countries that have now agreed to be transparent and evaluated under the African peer review mechanism principles of democracy and good governance. An extremely important tool. We've already had over 40 such evaluations. Let's discuss the outcomes of those reviews with each of the African countries and look at areas where it was found there are gaps that must be addressed, and look at how we work together. And in that way, you build a platform toward the objective you eventually seek to achieve. But to come in and seek to teach a country that, we know how democracy functions, and we've come to tell you, you do it, it will work for you. I think it leads to defeat. So we need to think in different ways. I also think that one of the lessons we also need to learn and perhaps draw lessons from, one of the experiences we should draw lessons from, is the reality that there has been a lot of external interference in Africa. And a lot of that external interference has fueled conflict in many African countries, has fueled instability, perhaps better than myself. This is a reality. So in my view, while there may be concern about Wagner Group or Van Dyck, which is another security group which was in Mozambique, there's also a concern about countries that have mineral interests in African countries and are there as a destabilizing force.
Check this out. I'm going to show you how I afforded this car. Okay, you ready? All right, $118 for.
So I think we need to look at the full plethora of problems that give rise to insecurity, bad governance, and the absence of democracy on the African continent. It's not a one-country problem. It's a world phenomenon which results from Africa's rich mineral wealth that has made it a significant target of external players that don't always have the interests of Africa at heart. Then countries are free to establish relationships with different countries. African countries that wish to relate to China, let them do so, whatever the particular form of relationships would be. We can't be made party to a conflict between China and the United States of America. And I may say it does cause instability for all of us because it affects the global economic system. We really hope that the United States and China will arrive at a point of rapprochement where all of us can look to economic development and growth for all our countries, because that's extremely important for all of us. And these are two great powers, the two biggest economies in the world. They've got to find a way of working together to allow us to grow.
I think the most important point I would want to emphasize is what the lady just touched on, and also what you noted in your question, which is, first, as we're here in South Africa, we'll be going on to the DRC and Rwanda. I've spent time in Nigeria, Kenya, other places, and again, the purpose of our engagement, which I'll talk about at some length a little bit later this afternoon, in laying out our broader approach to Africa, is about Africa, is about the relationship between us, is about what we can do together as partners to the benefit of our own people, and I think to the benefit of people around the world. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on this planet will be African. Within the next couple of years, half the population of this continent will be 25 years old or younger. So this is the future, quite literally. And what we're investing in is that future. And this gets to the point that when it comes to other countries that may be engaged here, our purpose is not to say, you have to choose. It's to, in effect, offer a choice. And the choice that we offer, at least that we hope and expect to offer, is an affirmative one, a positive one, where we hope together to engage in a race to the top, not a race to the bottom, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's health, whether it's climate, whether it's security. And on security, I think what we're seeing Russia mostly export to the most challenged places on the continent is its proxy, the Wagner Group, which is resulting in increased death and destruction in far too many countries. But part of the reason that
now let me go into what he's saying here. So he said a Wagner Group are a province on the African continent that are increasing in death, right? That are killing people, right? Now, maybe he doesn't know the history of Africa, or he's trying to pretend what the West have done to Africa. Let's just go back to DRC Congo alone. Just Congo alone. So is he telling us that this Wagner Group are in DRC killing people. Almost every day in Congo, people die. Thousands of people die. Blinking. Thousands of people die because of African people resources, because of DRC Congo people resources. You have all these foreign military. You have the United States military there. You even have the United Nations there. To the extent that if one United Nations or worker die in DRC Congo, it becomes a problem to the UN, and then the UN say it's a war crime. But thousands of Congolese are dying on a daily basis. UN have never said it's a war crime against humanity. When you have all these rebel groups in DRC Congo, at the same time, you have all these foreign companies in DRC Congo stealing and looting the resources. And these foreign companies are the people that are supplying the rebel groups with ammunition, because this is how they get their resources. You're not talking about that. And you're talking about Wagner groups. When the French military were in Mali, who were killing innocent civilians? Who were shooting innocent civilians? The military, the French military groups. When did you speak about it? When did you speak about it? Now, the Russian private army in Mali, they are the same people that are helping the Malians to fight the jihadi or the terrorists. Just this week, the Russian gave another aircraft, 3 or 4 aircraft to the Malian military to fight jihadi. Then how can you say these Wagner groups are the people that are killing the citizens, are killing the Malian? You are not being truthful here. You are not being truthful. Lies and deceive in your face. Let's continue.
The Wagner Group has some traction is that in the absence of an alternative to building security, countries may sign on and sign up. So this comes to offering an alternative. Congress passed and we're implementing something called the Global Fragility Act, which allows us to focus.
I've got a problem that I'm pretty sure you can help me with. Yes, you will be paid for helping me. Actually paid
resources in a sustained way and in a comprehensive way in helping.
He's saying here, these are all just mere talk. Don't you have African on the African continent? Don't you have one of the largest military groups on the African continent? What have they done to protect African people? What have they done to kill those jihadi or terrorists? Don't you have one of the sophisticated weapons or military in the world? What are they doing on the African continent? You have the most military group on the African continent than these Wagner. But what are you doing on the African continent to fight the jihadi? None. But you are protecting strategic mineral resource area that you are basing. And are you talking about coming out with new form? What kind of new form or strategic intervention that you are going to bring to the African continent that we will believe you? Because over the year, you have kept creating strategic this sustainable development, sustainable global investment, sustainable partnership, all the partnership, all the development, all the this, you have created it. And we are seeing none.
In countries, mostly in Africa, address challenges in a way that does not lead to violence, to insecurity, to terrorism, that tries to get ahead of the problem. And our perspective on security is, yes, there's obviously an important part for the hard security element of this, including arms sales with principles that we attach to them. But that is, while necessary, totally insufficient. And what we really need and what we're focused on is a much more holistic approach that gets at some of the root causes that lead to state failure, that lead to people having deep frustration and seeing no hope for the future, and changing that trajectory. So that's our focus. I'll speak a little bit more about it in just a little while. In terms
Mr. Blinken, your focus should be on getting yourself back in your plane, go back to the White House, tell Joe Biden what you should do, and let me tell you what people should do. Take out all of your military on the African continent. Number one. Number two, stop interfering in African elections. Number three, stop undermining African leaders. Number four, stop undermining African democracy. Number five, stay out of African affairs. Simple. Number six, do not force your European democracy, your European form of democracy, democracy, failocracy on African people. Because nowhere in the world you people have established democracy and a function rightfully. Because even in your own country, it is not democracy. As you speak about it, get that clear.
In terms of inconsistency, sure. I think it's we have these conversations, and we like to think that we're engaged consistently on every issue, but we all have our shortcomings. We could probably look back at a number of things that suggest that we're applying principles in one place in one way, but not the same way in another. And that's a really important conversation to have. And I learn a tremendous amount from my friend and colleague in having those conversations. But in the case here of whether it's Ukraine and the aggression by Russia, whether it's Taiwan and China, or whether it's the Middle East, we are working to uphold some of these basic principles. We may have different ways we think it is most effective to do it in a given case. But again, in the case of the Middle East, we both believe strongly in a two-state solution. We both believe strongly in the need for Israelis and Palestinians to live with equal measures of democracy, of opportunity, of dignity. We both believe.
The fact is, Mr. Blinken, you feel in the Middle East, and up to now, you still feel in Palestine. You support nations that bomb the Palestinians 24/7, that kill the Palestinians 24/7. You feel you are not who you are as you present yourself to the world. The Middle East, as we speak, is completely destroyed. Where is the democracy? The Palestinians are crying every day, and they are dying in numbers. Where does your support go? The same people that bomb the Palestinians. Where is the human feeling that you have? Leave Africa alone.
Strongly that diplomacy is the most important tool that we can bring to bear on any problem, any challenge. Now, within that, there may be different tactical approaches. There may be concerns that we're spending too much time on one thing and not enough on another, and that's exactly what we talk about. And one of the great strengths.
Thank you very much. It's Zianda Ngobo from Newsroom Africa. Quite important that Minister Pandor mentioned the Section 232 tariffs, which I think would speak to the implementation part of the two countries' cooperation.
Thank you. My name is Sophie Mkwena from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Secretary of State and Minister, you spoke about world affairs. As we speak, the war in Ukraine, the Gaza conflict, we saw.
You're the guy.
Okay, so let me read what Denny said. So this is what Denny posted, and which of course I just want to add to it. Okay, Denny said, yes, AFRICOM is headed by a newly installed 4-star general, a petit bourgeoisie. Now, let's explain that first of all. The first question here is, why waited all these years? Why waited all these years before naming this man? Of course, we know the answer to that. The colonizer or the suppressor or the oppressor, right? What they do, they are very strategic in their thoughts and movement. They are very sophisticated. They know in this time period of geopolitics, they go to use another black man to fulfill their aim. You know, they always use the black man when it comes to a point. They always use the black man to fulfill their aim, to put things into place, into right perspective for them. And then afterward, they kick all that black men. So that's the reason why they send this general, this black bourgeoisie, because he's going there with the mindset of he's coming to work for his country, America, forgetting his people, forgetting that the moment mission is accomplished and he come back to America, he will be a Negro. He will be an African American. Therefore, a class citizen, he will no longer have it. They will take it from him. He will be a common man, no respect. But guess what? Just how we are not going to support anybody that is not in our interest, and just how we are going to support non-black who are in our interest, just how we support China in a struggle, just how we support Russia in a struggle, because China have been there in our struggle and Russia have been there in our struggle. Now, our struggle have been against whom? The colonizer. Our struggle have been against whom? Europe. Our struggle, freedom, independence have been against whom? The oppressor, the Washington, D.C. And who have been there for us? China and Russia. So in the same way, we are going to be there with anybody. And anybody who look like us, that does not recognize what we stand for, we don't count you. Count yourself to be out. And this military men that have been sent, this general, says to him, just turn around and come back to your America and tell them, say, you resign or you retire. You cannot do the job because it's not going to work. So let's get back to the discussion.
Guy with a gun, the person who would do anything to protect the ones you love. But did you know you could go to jail for simply doing the right thing to keep your family safe?
What happened a few days ago. And finally, in Asia, the visit of the Speaker of the US, Nancy Pelosi, to Taiwan has also caused a major tension between the US and China. What is it that both countries can do in maintenance of peace and prosperity, looking at these three issues? And finally, the elections in Kenya, your message on the eve of the elections, the biggest economy in East Africa.
Lady, would you like me to start?
Yeah.
There's a lot there. Let me see if I can. First of all, on the eve of elections, we and I think everyone in the region and beyond is watching to see that they go forward peacefully, freely, openly, and that's certainly our expectation. Let me try and put this in broader context, because in our conversations that we've had over many months, but also that we had today, there's a fundamental agreement between us, and that is that this is a time of tremendous challenge across a whole host of issues that are affecting our people. Obviously, COVID, also climate change, also the impact of new technologies on all of our lives. And the shared desire that the United States and South Africa have is to focus.
Listen. So did you see how he dodged the question and then talking about COVID and then talking about the relationship between South Africa and the United States? He was asked about Nancy Pelosi visit to Taiwan that have caused problem between Taiwan and China, and what would be the effect, to summarize it, what would be the effect on the war? So in other words, what was the importance of Nancy Pelosi visit to Taiwan when she was told not to go, when you didn't respect another nation? And he left the answer or the question and say something different that does not even relate to the question.
Focus our energies, our attention, our resources.
Saturday, August 13th, PFL MMA comes to Cardiff for the first time, live on ESPN and ESPN+.
Resources, our time to engaging these issues. That's what I think our people expect, and that's what we prefer to be doing. So we don't see conflict anywhere. We did not want the Russian aggression against Ukraine. We tried very hard to diplomatically to ward it off, because that's not how we want to be spending our time. And similarly, the reaction now by
So we're going to take his words bit by bit. You did not want to see Russia and Ukraine war to escalate, right? But then, why are you supporting Ukraine with arms and ammunition? Why are you supporting Ukraine with arms and ammunition? Why can't you tell Zelensky, look, make peace with Russia? Russia, from the beginning of this thing, Russia said he want to make peace with the Ukrainian. But this is what he wants for the Ukrainian to do. And you are there pumping Zelensky, and up to today, you're still giving him military support, lying to him that he's going to win the war, knowingly he cannot win Russia. So you see your statement here is a blunter lie, very deceiving, it's not truthful. And that is why African leaders, we cannot trust men like this. He's a liar. Blinken is a liar, and you can see the lies in his face.
By China with regard to Taiwan and the military actions it's taken, allegedly in response to the peaceful visit of a member of our Congress. That too doesn't help things, nor does the fact that China has said it's ceasing cooperation with the United States on dealing with climate change. That's not punishing the United States. That's punishing the entire world, and especially the developing world, and notably Africa, because China and the United States are the number one and number two emitters in the world. We have a special responsibility to make sure that we're leading on dealing with climate change. It's deeply unfortunate that China has chosen, for now at least, to stop that engagement. So my point is,
again, you see, whenever you take yourself to be the only one that can decide, this is what happened, your ego. China did not decide, you decided because you did respect it. China as a superpower, just like you did respect him. You are warned not to go to Taiwan, and you went there. What do you think going to happen? As we speak right now, the Chinese have cut off most activities from Taiwan. Most activities from Taiwan. As we speak right now, Taiwan is surrounded by Chinese military. Taiwan is surrounded by Chinese military, and they are carrying on their drill. So the Taiwanese suffer just because you wanted to see the people go to the war, and then that will enable you to go in Africa with no competition, nobody competing with you, and then do what you want to do. You meant what you did. It was not by coincidence. And then CNN giving news to says that Nancy Pelosi visit to Taiwan, the president of the United States were unaware. Government officials were unaware. How can the third person in command of the United States travel with Air Force or Air Force One, and then you say the United States government did not know about Nancy Pelosi travel to Taiwan? What did she go with? Air Force. You know who go with Air Force One? Do you know who travel with Air Force? That was back then. You would lie to people. That was back then. You were lie to people with such statement, but not now. Do you know who travel with Air Force? When Air Force is traveling, do you know what kind of information? Do you know how even before you pick up? It was planned. You went there because you wanted to create tension between the two countries, because you cannot compete with China in Africa. That alone, China and Russia emerge. You cannot compete with them in Africa. And Africa, as you stated earlier, is the future of the world. Almost the entire planet will be African. You said it. How can you stop that? And that is why you are working to stop it. Nancy Pelosi traveled to Taiwan, and he said the United States government did not know about it. When you travel with Air Force, she traveled with Air Force One, and he said they did not know about it. And African leaders, stay put. Don't fall for this man's lies.
I think there's a profound agreement between us that we want to be spending our time focused on the issues that are really having an impact on the lives of our people. And together, it's what we did with the strategic dialogue today, we can make a real difference. But it's also important that when some of the basic principles of the international system, the international order, are being challenged, that we stand up and defend them. So the problem that we have with Russia's aggression against Ukraine is that it's not only an aggression against another country, it's an aggression against the foundational.
Why don't you?
You have done the most, the West in the world, and you want to talk about Russia transgression or aggression in Ukraine. Who went to Iraq with the pretext of nuclear weapon and did not find nuclear weapon, but never apologized to the Iraqi, never paid reparation to the Iraqi, killed the people president and destroyed the country? Up to this time today, the people are displaced in the world. Who have created the most displaced people, citizens of the world? Who went in Libya and killed the president, destroyed the country, destabilized the country? And today, Libyans are displaced all around the world. No peace. Families are scattered. Families looking for families. They can't find each other. Loved one cannot find their friend, loved one. They are looking for each other. And they may never see each other again. And you want to talk about principle?
You own commercial real estate. Yes, you. Why don't you own commercial?
Principles of the international system. Multilateralism, something that we both believe in and invest in. The United Nations Charter, which puts at its heart the sovereignty and independence of nations. And it was created in large part to try to, after the 2 world wars, to make sure that there wasn't another one. And the basic principles that it established were designed to do that. But if we allow a big country to bully a smaller one, to simply invade it and take its territory, then it's going to be open season, not just in Europe, but around the world, and we'll have repercussions.
So, I mean, these people have no shame. I mean, they have no shame. Who is talking about a country bullying smaller country? Who is talking about a country bullying smaller country? These people have no shame at all. Oh my God. Really? Because when you need the black man, when you need the African man, that's the time you come out to pretend. Who is talking about country bullying small country or smaller country? Blinken, you have done the worst. You have done the worst. You have bullied smaller nation in the world and tell them if you do not agree to Washington, D.C. policy, we will remove your government. We will undermine your government. We will put sanction on you. Have you not done that? Is that not bullying? Go find a place to sit down.
Here and repercussions everywhere, which is why we've felt it important to stand up for those principles. And we hope see, as the Ukrainian president has said, this resolved diplomatically over time, but
now, who went in Ukraine in 2014 and overthrew the president? Who did it? Who bullied Ukraine? Who bullied Ukraine in 2014, overthrew the president and put in new government, today Zelensky? And the government you overthrew in 2014 escaped and went to Russia. Who did it? Answer that question for me.
Meanwhile, we have to defend the proposition that Ukraine's sovereignty and independence matter. They matter to Ukrainians. but they also matter to the world. On the Middle East, I'll just say that we're pleased to see that there is apparently a ceasefire now, and I want to note the important role that Egypt has played in helping to achieve that. We've talked about this a lot over these months, and again today. It's very important that.
All right, folks, I'm going to take this video out because, I mean, there's no shame in his face. Where in the Middle East he's talking about there is ceasefire right now? Where in the Middle East there is ceasefire? Where in the Middle East they have created democracy? You destroyed a nation. Up to today, those nations, those citizens are displaced all around the world. You destroy civilization that you cannot even build and will not even be built decades to come. You destroy a culture that you did not build and you will not build it and will not even be built decades to come. And you want to talk about bullying. Russia is bullying other nations, or China is bullying other nations. When you are the biggest bully of the world, the West are the biggest bully of the world. We know that. And you think you sat over there speaking with confidence. It did not occur to you that African people know these things? Who are the biggest bully of the world? Who are the biggest human rights violator of the world? And you sat down there and spoke with confidence? Go back. When you come back, and I believe you have come back. If not, if you are staying in Africa, when you come back to the United States, just go on Google and type the biggest bully nation in the world. I'm not going to call it, and you see what will come up. Just type in the nation that have invaded lot of nation in the world. You will see what will come up. I'm not going to call it, but just do these things. Go on the internet, blinking, and just type in places that the CIA have undermined, government that the CIA have undermined, and you will see what will come up. And in fact, what 2 or 3 weeks ago, John Bolton, another Secretary of State, former Secretary of State, right? He sat down on CNN and confessed that he have taken part in many coup d'etat around the world. And you want to talk about nation bullying other nation? That's a bully. And come on national media with confident, and spoke and said, I took part in many coup d'etat around the world, spoke with confidence. Is that not bully? Nobody trusts you, people. You see, be careful what you do because it will haunt you. And the time has come. It is haunting you, people. That is why even when you speak, there is no truth. It lacks truth. It lacks substance. And we do not believe you, and we will not believe you again. So, let me take this out here. So I'm still frozen. Well, but at least the conversation is going on. So I don't really care whether they try to mess up the internet. As long as you can hear me talking, that's the bottom line about it. As long as you can hear the video, that's the bottom line about it. As long as you can see the article that I post for reading, that's the bottom line about it. The messages must go through. Now, let me show you the last video. Why we do not support anyone but African and African people and people that are in the interest of African people those are the people we support. If China is in the interest of African people, we support China. If Russia is in the interest of African people, we support Russia. And this is why we do not support nations that are not in our interest. I'm about to show you it right now. And we are not in support of nations that are not in our interest and telling us to take a side. And the side that we should take, it should be their side. We will not. We will take the side of a nation that are on our side. Now, this is the last video, and then we call it for a day. And this video is the reason why we do not and will not take the side of the colonizer. Point blank, simple as that.
They are not like us. They think carefully. The Chinese are not like us. They are not like us. They think carefully. They consider all the options. For them, the use of force is the last resort. But once they decide to use it, they will go all the way to the end, if necessary, to be successful. But we need to understand that they're now on a very different path, and they're not going to get off that path for some time, at least not until we demonstrate that we have a completely new government in the hands of responsible, educated, mature adults.
Based on what you've seen from the Biden administration and the State Department over the past several months, are you worried about the future of the United States and the collective West? I mean, like you have just yesterday, Zelensky, at the behest likely of Pelosi and the State Department, come out and demand that China have direct talks with Ukraine to get, to basically condemn Russia and bring the Russian military operation to an end. Like, how delusional are these people? What do you make of this? And how much of this is integral to the system, meaning, as some put it, like within the deep state? It doesn't really matter if it's a Republican or Democrat president. It's just kind of going to be there no matter what.
With very few exceptions. And there are some good exceptions on the Hill. Several in the House and a few in the Senate. I don't think the people we're dealing with are truly serious. And by this, I mean, they don't seem to understand that we don't live in 1990. After all, you're talking about people that presided over a money printing exercise that amounts in real terms to about 4 times the amount of money that we have printed in our entire history as a nation. That particular horse has left the barn. Nobody seems to care. And I think by the spring of next year, we'll see. But inflation will probably reach 10, 12, 15%. And at that point, I guess the game is over. And then we'll find out the consequence with this sort of Weimar approach to economics. But I just don't see that the people in charge understand the gravity of their actions. This thing with Mrs. Pelosi is almost comedic if you stop and think about it. And what we don't appreciate is the impact on the Chinese or the Russians. We never bothered to listen to the Russians. And they were quite serious about their concerns with the potential to put forces in eastern Ukraine that would threaten Russia. And indeed, we were doing everything in our power to support that. We haven't listened carefully to the Chinese. For instance, Xi, who is now being vilified as some sort of Hitlerian figure, had identified the year 2049 as the probable date for peaceful reunification of Taiwan and China. Now, why would we be upset over that? Why would that concern us in any way? Everyone in Asia has recognized Beijing as the legitimate leader of the Chinese nation. Most people in Asia view what's happening right now between Taiwan and China as an internal Chinese affair. And they're trying to figure out why we want to intervene in it and turn it into a regional war, as we've almost turned Ukraine into a regional war. A friend of mine was talking to me earlier today, and he's got a lot of experience on the Hill, worked in Congress and in the Senate. And he said, Doug, he said, what the people in Moscow and Beijing don't understand is that the majority of people in Washington are pimples on the backside of American history. They don't matter. But unfortunately, people in Moscow and Beijing have concluded that they do matter, that they're serious. And as a result, they're acting the way they do. I mean, the one thing that Nancy Pelosi did accomplish on her trip was to solidify the relationship between Moscow and Beijing. I would not be surprised if we did not hear a formal announcement and watched some sort of signing ceremony bringing this alliance to fruition between the Russians and the Chinese, making it a real military alliance. The Russians have already said to the Chinese that they will back China in whatever it deems appropriate, whatever it wants to do. And we continue to sit there and act as though this is a joke, that this is unserious. That what do they think we are? I mean, set aside all the nonsense about moral supremacy, which we like to preach. Let's just look at the facts. We're not the world's sole superpower. We're not the same country we were in 1991. We have enormous problems, particularly with the economy, with internal societal cohesion, which is a polite way of saying we're divided along racial lines and economic lines. Why would you do these things? Why would you poke these two cobras and expect them to react any differently from the way they have? So I think my friend is right. I think these people will go down in history as having created conditions for destruction and anarchy in the international system, have further eroding our position, undermining our prestige and our credibility. And hopefully that's it, because the biggest mistake we could make is to suddenly sail most of the United States Navy over there and present the Chinese with a target array and make demands on them. Because at that point, the Chinese will act. And the Chinese are not like us. They are not like us. They think carefully. They consider all the options. For them, the use of force is the last resort. But once they decide to use it, they will go all the way to the end, if necessary, to be successful. In the meantime, they will do what they can to undermine us and our position in Asia. There's no question about it. What else would you expect them to do? But we need to understand that they're now on a very different path, and they're not going to get off that path for some time, at least not until we demonstrate that we have a completely new government in the hands of responsible, educated, mature adults.
This is what I have to give today. And we end with that video. And that is why we do not care. And we will not care about what America say, who we should support or who we should not support. You cannot go and create your enemy and you expect African people to be enemies to them. Meanwhile, you have a hidden motive, because with those two nations, you cannot compete on the African continent. So in order to get the African continent back, and not even to compete on the African continent, because your sole motive here on the African continent and for African people is to suppress African people, oppress African people, and underdevelop African people and steal African people resources. That is your sole motive. So in order to do that, you have to put these two nations in conflict. What you have done, Russia is in conflict with Ukraine. Now, Russia's attention is on war. The next thing here is to turn the attention of China in conflict with Taiwan while China is in war. Now, they will not focus on Africa, and then you cannot go in Africa. And in that, African leaders or African authorities can no longer go to China or to Russia for help, even for military purposes. African leaders will not go to Russia for military purpose, for military help, for military equipment, because Russia have to use her military equipment to fight her war. China have to use her military equipment and her technology to fight her war. In that case, Africa will be left to you alone. So geopolitics is what playing out here. Now, you making, like the last video said, you making China to look like utter hero. You making Russia to look like Russia is the one bullying or Russia is the one invading other people. Take responsibility of what you have done. Because those nations like Russia want you seriously not to do what you did. China again wants you seriously not to do what you did. But because you have a hailing motive. And this is why we will not support you, because you have a hailing motive. Whenever there's a hailing motive, that means your intention is bad. And that's why it's hating. And because your intention is bad, not in the interest of African people, that is why African people are saying, we do not support you. And we will not support you. And we will not make your enemies our enemies. First of all, Nelson Mandela told us that clear. Nelson Mandela said, if Russia was in the struggle for us, if Cuba was in the struggle for us, when we gain our independence from whom? From the colonizer. Henceforth, we will not be an enemy to Russia because you are an enemy to Russia. We will not be an enemy to Cuba because you are an enemy to Cuba. Who did African people gain independence from? You people, the West. In Alata war getting independent, who came to our rescue? Russia. Who gave us financial support? Russia. Who gave us military support? Russia. And then you want us to go against Russia when we were fighting against it for independence? Hell no. That means you are telling us African people don't think. And we think. And we know what is going on. We know who play fire. Who know. We know who commit all the adultery. All the problems of the world. Then how can you come and tell us we should pick a side, and the side we should pick, it should be your side? Even if you tell us, say, you are not dictating to African people, but it is clear that you are telling us to turn against China and Russia. Because it is in your messages, it is in your writing, it is in your speech or your speeches. It is in your attitude, everything. So we will decide. Don't decide for us. The time has come, African. The time has come. It is African resources that they need. Do not go in for money. And let me say one thing here, African. These people is the truth. They do not love African people. Do you know why up to this time, why Africa does not have a permanent seat in the United Nations? Let me give you the secret today. Let me give you the secret today why African or Africa does not have a permanent seat in the so-called United Nations. Let me give you the secret today. You know what is going on the African continent right now? It's all about the African resources. Do you know why they are going on the African continent and begging African people? It's all about the African resources. Now, why would they pour African people on the United Nations to have a permanent seat? Or why they will not do it? They will not do it because if Africa have a permanent seat on the United Nations, almost anything that Africa bring to the agenda, to the table, nation will vote in favor of what Africa bring to the table. Because any nation that vote against the idea of Africa, that nation will not have the taste of the African resources. That nation will not sign any treaty with the African people, because African people will realize that you are not in their interest. Henceforth, you will not get a taste of the African resources. So if they bring African people on the United Nations to have a permanent seat, anything that pass that African people bring out, it will be passed in the United Nations. anything that African bring out, it will be passed in the United Nations. Because everybody want to have business with Africa. Nobody will disagree with Africa. That means when African people say today, Europe and America should pay reparation, everybody will vote. Everybody will vote. Henceforth, they will pay reparation. That means if African people say Europe and America should pay reparation for colonizing, destabilizing, or not developing the African continent, to every nation in Africa, everybody will vote because nobody will want to vote against Africa because everybody wants the resources. If African people say America should pay reparation to the descendant of the African in America here, everybody will vote because nobody want to vote against African, because if you do it, you will not get the African resources. And that go to Europe as well. So that is why they do not want to give permanency to Africa in the United Nations, but rather they make Africa as an observer, a continent. They make her as an observer. Folks, that is the truth. And I can tell you, if Africa become part of the United Nations and have a permanent seat, and Africa dominate and control the United Nations, all these countries, the UN will drop out of the United Nations. They will say they do not want to be part of the United Nations. Even Europe will say they do not want to be part of the United Nations. Because you know what? That means Africa control the United Nations. Africa, the United Nations voice will be Africa. Because when we speak, it will be it. Because no nation will want to pour forth against what we bring to the table. Because they need the African resources. That's how powerful the African continent is. That's how powerful African people are. That's how powerful African leaders are. That is it, folks. We stop here for today. So African leaders, we look up to you people. Lead like leaders. Lead like warriors. Don't allow anyone to dictate to you. In September, when you are coming for that United Nations summit, come like leaders. Come like leaders from the African continent. Come like you are coming to lead. Come like you control the United Nations. You already know why they do not want to give you permanent seat. Henceforth, but when you come that you control them. This time around, come that you control them. Plus the United Nations, manage the United Nations, come and tell them Africa is the future. Africa has been the future. Come and tell them Africa is the one that built Europe, is the one that built America, and up to now today, you are still depending on Africa. Come and tell them in September when you come for the United Nations Summit. Come and tell them, do not allow anyone to use their capital influence to influence you, or their capital power to influence you. You have the resources, you have the resource power, which you cannot even measure with capital, because capital does not come close. Capital is a money, is a paper. It do not come close to your resources. It is time that we wake up. It is time the time has come for us to harvest. The time has come for us to harvest. The time has come for us to prove to the world. Those that said African people are not good at leadership. They are only good at dancing. They are only good to be bourgeoisie. They are only good to be neo-colonialists. They are only good to be puppets. The time has come for us to tell them, you are the one that we're going to do as a puppet. The time has come, even though we may not use them, but the time has come to tell them, no, Africa has waken up. We are united, whether home and abroad. We are united because we are identified our one common enemy. Folks, thank you for being here. We will see you next week, even though I got frozen. Up to this time, they're still holding it. But hey, the message went through. We got the truth. And I will see you guys next week. And we encourage you to share subscribe, like, and we thank you again for your donation. Whether on YouTube, whether on Twitter, whether on pay-per-view or PayPal, or whether to our website, we say thank you for your donation. And to all those who have joined our Patreon, we say thank you and continue your contribution as we grow this platform. See you all next week, or see you tomorrow again. Bye.